By the middle decades of the 19th century, Manchester no longer resembled a traditional city. It functioned as an apparatus. Production shaped everything. The skyline, the streets, the daily rhythms of its people. Chimneys rose in dense clusters, taller than church towers, expelling smoke that drifted low and persistent, muting daylight and tinting the sky a permanent gray. Even at noon, the city felt dim. Sound filled every space. Metal striking metal, steam venting under pressure, carts rattling across uneven roads, thousands of footsteps moving in coordinated urgency. This was not simply urban noise. It was the sound of continuous output. Manchester had not evolved gradually. It had surged forward within the span of a single human lifetime. Coal-fueled steam, steam-powered machines, and machines reorganized human labor on an unprecedented scale. What had emerged here was not planned in advance. No single authority designed it. The city was shaped by momentum, by demand, capital, and technological possibility accelerating faster than social structures could respond. Today, with the aid of modern tools, historic engravings and early photographs can be animated, allowing us to pass through Manchester as it appeared in the 1850s. What becomes visible is not just a place, but a process. This was a city in motion, constantly rebuilding itself around production. Manchester did not set out to invent the modern world. It assembled it piece by piece, driven by speed rather than foresight. To understand how radical this transformation was, it helps to look back only a few decades earlier. In 1750, Manchester was a small provincial town. Its population hovered around 20,000. The town served the surrounding countryside, supporting local trade, agriculture, and small-scale craft production. Churches marked the skyline. Inns clustered near the marketplace. Workshops operated on a human scale. The River Irwell ran relatively clear, providing water and modest transport routes. There was nothing about Manchester that distinguished it sharply from dozens of similar towns across northern England. That balance did not last. The introduction of cotton manufacturing changed everything. Early mills relied on water power, tying production to rivers and seasonal flow. But the true transformation began when steam engines replaced water wheels. Steam broke the geographical limits of industry. Factories could now be built wherever coal could be delivered. In Manchester, coal was abundant, transport links expanded quickly, and investment followed. Mills multiplied. Their size increased. Their machinery became more complex and faster with each iteration. As production intensified, population followed. By 1800, Manchester had grown to around 50,000 people. By 1850, it exceeded 300,000. This was not gradual urban growth. It was compression. Housing, streets, and infrastructure were constructed rapidly, often without long-term planning. Roads were narrow. Drainage was inadequate. Buildings were erected close together to minimize cost and maximize capacity. The city expanded outward and upward at the same time, driven by immediate demand rather than future stability. By the 1850s, almost nothing remained of the earlier market town. The physical environment had been reorganized around factories. Workplaces dominated neighborhoods. Residential districts pressed up against mill walls. The city no longer oriented itself around civic life, but around production cycles. At the center of this system were the cotton mills themselves. Entering a mill in the 1850s meant stepping into an overwhelming sensory environment. The noise was constant and intense. Power looms struck with mechanical precision. Spinning frames rotated at high speed. Steam engines transmitted motion through belts and shafts that linked entire floors into a single moving organism. Sound echoed and layered until individual machines became indistinguishable from the collective roar. Speech was impractical. Workers communicated through gestures and visual cues. Over time, they learned to interpret changes in pitch and rhythm, recognizing mechanical problems by sound alone. The mill was not silent even for a moment. Production continued as long as steam pressure held. The air inside was thick with cotton fibers. Fine dust floated continuously, settling on skin, clothing, and lungs. To prevent threads from snapping, humidity was maintained by keeping windows closed, even during warmer months. Ventilation was minimal. Heat accumulated. Breathing became labor, Workers were responsible for multiple machines at once. Their movements were repetitive and precise, tying broken threads, replacing bobbins, clearing jams, maintaining speed. The pace was dictated by machinery, not by human endurance. Attention could not lapse. A moment of distraction risked injury. Gears did not slow for hands. Belts did not pause for fatigue. Shifts commonly lasted 12 to 14 hours, 6 days a week. Breaks were brief and strictly regulated. Time itself was mechanized. The factory bell replaced natural rhythms. It signaled when to arrive, when to eat, when to leave. Daylight mattered less than output. For the first time on a mass scale, human lives were synchronized to machines. This was not incidental. It was the core innovation. The mill reorganized labor into a continuous system. Individuals were interchangeable within it. Productivity depended on maintaining uninterrupted motion. When one worker failed, another replaced them. The machine did not stop. Outside the mills, the city adapted to this logic. Streets filled before dawn and again at dusk as shifts changed. Entire neighborhoods rose and rested according to factory schedules. Shops opened early and closed late to serve workers. Taverns clustered near mill gates. The city's daily life revolved around the needs of industry. Manchester's expansion, however, consistently outpaced its capacity to support its population. Housing was constructed quickly and cheaply. Streets were laid out with minimal spacing. Public services lagged behind growth. Density intensified pressure on every system: water, sanitation, transport, health. This imbalance was visible everywhere. Smoke darkened buildings within months. Soot coated windows, walls, and clothing. The smell of coal combustion mixed with industrial waste. Rivers carried dyes and chemicals downstream. These were not side effects. They were signals. Smoke meant production. Noise meant output. A city operating at full capacity was loud, dark, and crowded. Manchester's appearance shocked visitors. Some described it as oppressive and hostile. Others saw it as proof of progress. What could not be denied was its scale and intensity. No city had ever concentrated production this completely, nor absorbed population so rapidly. By the 1850s, Manchester was no longer simply a place where goods were made. It was a system that converted raw materials, energy, and human labor into finished products with unprecedented efficiency. Everything else, housing patterns, daily routines, social organization, aligned around that purpose. This was the engine room of industrial modernity. And from this point, its influence would extend far beyond the city itself. Beyond the factory walls, Manchester's industrial logic continued uninterrupted. The city did not end where production stopped. It extended into living spaces, waterways, transport lines, and social structures, binding daily life to the same forces that powered the mills. Worker housing emerged wherever space could be found. Rows of brick terraces were built back to back, often with no rear ventilation and minimal separation between buildings. Streets were narrow, frequently unpaved, and crowded at all hours. Many families occupied a single room. Multiple households shared water pumps, courtyards, and privies. Privacy was rare, silence almost non-existent. These neighborhoods formed quickly, responding to immediate labor demand rather than long-term habitability. Infrastructure lagged behind population growth. Clean water was unreliable. Waste disposal inadequate. Disease spread easily through dense districts where people lived in constant proximity. Cholera, typhoid, and tuberculosis were recurring threats, not anomalies. Manchester's population was not only growing, it was changing. Large numbers of Irish migrants arrived during and after the famine of the 1840s. By the early 1850s, they made up a significant portion of the city's residents. Many settled in the most overcrowded districts, where rents were lowest and conditions harshest. Areas such as Angel Meadow and Little Ireland became symbols of extreme urban density. Social tensions existed, particularly around employment and wages, but necessity overrode separation. Workplaces mixed populations. Streets forced coexistence. Survival depended less on identity than on endurance. The work was dangerous. Injuries were common. Limbs were crushed. Fingers lost. Years spent breathing cotton dust damaged lungs. In the poorest districts, average life expectancy hovered around 26 years. This was not speculation. It was recorded. Doctors reported it. Reformers published it. Parliamentary inquiries confirmed it. The data circulated widely. The conditions were known. Yet production continued. Life in Manchester followed a regulated rhythm. The factory bell structured the day. It announced when streets filled and when they emptied. It overrode natural cycles. Seasons mattered less than schedules. Artificial light extended working hours. Time became segmented, measured, and enforced. The city's atmosphere reflected this intensity. Smoke from hundreds of chimneys merged into a persistent haze. Coal fires burned continuously, powering steam engines and heating homes. Buildings darkened quickly, coated in soot that resisted cleaning. Rivers carried industrial waste, dyes, chemicals, runoff, turning watercourses opaque and foul-smelling. Pollution was not treated as failure. It was interpreted as proof of activity. A smoking chimney meant a mill was operational. A darkened sky meant production was high. Industrial output was visible in the air itself. Visitors responded in different ways. Some described Manchester as grim and oppressive. Others saw vitality and momentum. What all recognized was scale. This was a city operating at maximum intensity, converting resources into goods with unprecedented speed. That speed depended on global connections. Manchester did not grow cotton, processed it. Raw material arrived primarily from the American South, where enslaved labor produced the fiber that fed British mills. By the 1860s, the overwhelming majority of Manchester's cotton originated from plantations thousands of miles away. The connection was direct, economic, and essential. Transport infrastructure made this system viable. Cotton bales arrived in Liverpool by ship, then moved inland by canal and rail. The opening of the Liverpool and Manchester Railway in 1830 transformed logistics. What once took days by water could now be accomplished in hours. Speed compressed distance. Faster transport meant faster turnover. Faster turnover meant higher output. Finished goods followed the same routes in reverse. Cloth, thread, and garments left Manchester bound for markets across Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas. The city consumed little of what it produced. Its function was processing, not use. Value lay in motion. Canals, once the backbone of industrial transport, began to decline in importance by the 1850s. Railways offered reliability, volume, and speed that waterways could not match. The Bridgewater Canal, once revolutionary, was now part of an older system being overtaken by its own success. Manchester operated as a node. Materials flowed in. Products flowed out. The city's wealth depended on maintaining uninterrupted circulation. Any disruption, labor unrest, supply shortages, transport delays, threatened the entire system. Observers documented this world carefully. Friedrich Engels lived in Manchester during the 1840s and described stark divisions between wealth and poverty. He noted that industrialists often lived far from the districts where workers were concentrated. Though later research has shown these boundaries were sometimes more porous, the general pattern held: inequality was spatially embedded. Reformers toured the city. Physicians compiled reports on mortality, sanitation, and industrial injury. Government commissions gathered testimony from workers, factory owners, and civic officials. The evidence was extensive and consistent. Gradual reforms followed. Factory acts limited child labor and working hours. Public health initiatives addressed water supply and sewage. Housing regulations attempted, with limited success, to improve living conditions. At the same time, Manchester inspired admiration. Industrialists and officials from other regions visited to study its methods. They examined factory organization, labor discipline, transport integration, and output efficiency. What they saw was not chaos, but a system that worked harshly but effectively. That system spread. Across Britain, Europe, and North America, cities adopted Manchester's model. Factories multiplied. Workers migrated. Housing followed industry. Railways stitched regions together. The same patterns reappeared. Dense labor districts, polluted environments, rigid work schedules, global supply chains. Manchester became a reference point. Its problems were studied as cautionary examples. Its productivity was celebrated as proof of industrial potential. Reformers argued that conditions could be improved without abandoning the system. Others accepted the costs as necessary. By the 1850s, Manchester was no longer an experiment. It was precedent. Standing in the city at the end of a workday, watching workers spill from mill gates as smoke continued to rise, it was clear that something irreversible had occurred. Human labor, mechanical power, and global trade had been fused into a single operating system. The modern world did not emerge gradually. It accelerated into existence here, through noise, density, and relentless production. And once set in motion, it did not stop.